Welcome to Big Blend Radio with your hosts, Lisa and Nancy, editors of BigBlendMagazine.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to Big Blend Radio with Nancy and Lisa. You know, every first Tuesday we get excited because we get to focus on one of our favorite places in the country. We get to go to Asheville, North Carolina. And we host this show with our friends Steve and Karen Wilson. They are known as Mr. and Mrs. Wild because they're either out looking for wildlife or hanging out listening to local bands and regional bands. And actually, they travel all over looking for music. And they've done it around the world for wildlife, too. But they own and run the Lion and the Rose Bed and Breakfast, aptly named, in the Montfort Historic District of Asheville, North Carolina. I encourage you to go to their site, lion-rose.com. But today they said, you know, we talk a lot about tourism. They've been on the show telling us about what to do, you know, festivals. They've talked about beer and wine. We've had all kinds of guests on the show talking about the music, the history, everything pretty much. But today they were like, you know what? It's April, you know, Earth Day is coming. It's spring. They wanted to bring the Appalachian Wildlife Refuge into the spotlight. And so they're bringing Savannah Trantham on. She's the executive director and co-founder of the Appalachian Wild Refuge, and encourage you to go to their website, appalachianwild.org. So welcome to the show, Savannah. How are you?
Thank you for having me.
Hey, we're glad to have you here. And Steve and Karen, Mr. and Mrs. Wild, are you behaving yourselves in Asheville?
That's a trick question.
Sure is.
My. Are things getting wild out there? I know. Well, spring is in the air, right? So Karen, tell us a little bit about why we want to bring Appalachian Wildlife Refuge on the show. How did you first connect with them?
When we first got here 4.5 years ago, we started looking at nonprofit organizations we could help out because, of course, we want to help the community in any way we can. And as you know, like wildlife and veterans are like our main things we like to lean towards. So I just did a search around. We work with Asheville Humane Society as well, but I liked Appalachian Wild just because it was something smaller, something that was about rehabilitation and releasing back into the wild. And that's something we deeply believe in.
Oh, it's awesome. It's Savannah, can you give everyone an overview of Appalachian Wildlife Refuge? Because it seems like, you know, your region is so full of wildlife. Even, you know, Steve, you talk about, you know, the bears walking through the neighborhood, and then even, you know, guests at the B&B think like, why is there a bear outside the window? Who has a pet that's run loose, right? So like, it seems like wildlife is prevalent, whether you're in the suburbs or the city, which it doesn't feel like a city, but you know, or out, you know, maybe exploring even the Blue Ridge Parkway or the, you know, Pisgah National Forest. You know, you could be anywhere in the wilderness areas and encounter wildlife. So it seems like you guys kind of did this out of the like just a workload of wildlife that needed help.
That's right. So, you know, Asheville and the surrounding area of Western North Carolina, it's really a melting pot of people and wildlife. And it is an area that people move into and they come and visit and they spend a lot of time in, a lot of times because they want to connect with nature and wildlife. And it's kind of the perfect mesh of all of those. And with all of that, we see more and more human and wildlife interactions. And there was a steady need and an increase every single year of injured and orphan wildlife that needed somewhere to go. They needed a space that created rehabilitative care for them. And we just didn't have that in Western North Carolina. And so in 2014 and a little bit before that, we had a group of people come together and said, you know, how can we make this happen? And we worked really hard to get ourselves established as a nonprofit and then really build a foundation before we opened our doors and started accepting wildlife as an operation. And when we did that, and we opened our facility in 2018, and it has been wide open ever since, and the need continues to grow. We see an increase every single year of animals that are coming in, and the majority of them are coming in because they truly need rehabilitative care. It's human and wildlife interactions that lead to injured or orphan wildlife that need help to get back to the point that they can go back into the wild.
Is it mostly you say human and wildlife interaction? Is that mostly like from cars hitting animals, or is it, because I know spring is it's an important time to talk because there's baby birds and falling out of nests, and then also we don't understand when animals are left in their nests and mommy's going off hunting, or that kind of thing. So what when you talk about this human interaction with the wildlife, what are the most important things that we all need to understand so we do the right things?
Yeah, spring is a great time to talk about it because the spring and summer months in our area is the time that wildlife is really booming. That's when everybody who left for the winter is coming back and they're nesting, they're having babies. Everybody is out and active. Everybody who hibernated for the winter is out and moving and eating. And so the spring and summer are really busy for those reasons. And there's also a lot more tourism and visitors in the area. So we see even an increase in people in the region. And we see them for a variety of reasons. Hit by cars is a big reason that wildlife come in. We also have them because the cat and dogs get babies or adult animals, depending on the situation. We get a lot of them that come in that have been hit by lawnmowers or weed eaters, farm equipment. We have a lot of rural areas in this region. And so we also get a lot of animals that come in that have been hit by farm equipment. A lot of it is sometimes things such as nests being destroyed. We're right now in the middle of baby squirrel season. And so if people are cutting down trees or trees even come down with high winds like we just had over the weekend, we will get a lot of baby squirrels that are orphaned. A lot of times we get animals that come in because people think they need help, and in reality, they are just fine by themselves. So we do a lot of education as well through our hotline to help people determine if the animal really truly needs to come into care, because wildlife, moms know best, and they a lot of times are going to leave their babies in safe spaces while they go out and forage or look for food. And a lot of times people stumble upon these babies who are by themselves and assume they need help because they think they're orphaned. And so we do see quite a few that come in that have been taken out of the wild that don't necessarily need to be taken out of the wild. And then we also have a lot of animals that come in that are considered kind of part of the nuisance wildlife categories. And so people are trying to remove them, or neighbors get involved. We get a lot of them that come in that have been gunshots and a number of other factors like that. And so it's a kind of a wide variety of why they're coming in to care.
Man,
education is such a big part of what needs to happen to let people know what to do, when to do it, and when not to. Because people do kind of react, and if they don't know about the animal, first of all, it could be extremely dangerous, and maybe sometimes removing the animal that just needs to be left alone.
I see
give
that
it some
on
space.
Yeah, Nancy was saying, when you go on Facebook, there's all these groups, and I belong to a lot of North Carolina groups. It's all Steve's fault.
Yeah.
I don't know, but there's a lot of mushroom things going on in North Carolina and South Carolina and the wildlife, and you'll see people go,
I got nothing to do with them mushrooms.
Yeah, you
right.
got to watch out. But the snakes, especially, people are like, you need to leave the snake alone. And like one lady thought the snake was sick because of the eyes had white over it, and somebody's like, leave the snake alone, he's shedding his skin or her skin.
Yeah.
And people are like, no, you've got to take it to rehab now. And there's this war going on Facebook. So how much of what you do is actually trying to get the social media world to understand, like, leave the snake to shed its skin and let it have a safe place while it's doing it?
Yeah. So, a whole third of our mission and our purpose is education, and education to the community and to the public. And there are a lot of myths and beliefs that are out there about wildlife. There's a lot of things that are cultural. There's a lot of things that are passed down for generations. We live in an area that especially in our really rural areas of this region, that there's a lot of things that are passed generationally. And so that was one of the things that was really important to us, that, yes, we needed a place for wildlife, but we also needed to look at, why are wildlife animals coming in? Why are we seeing patients, and what things that we're seeing as causes do we have the ability to have some control to help prevent? Because in the ideal world, we would actually see a decrease in animals coming in every year, because we would be able to help keep more and more animals in the wild and not having to come in for these reasons. And so we have our hotline, our hotline is open 7 days a week, 12 hours a day in our busy season. And a lot of the calls that they're fielding are education based. It's a lot of just talking to people, letting them know that what they're experiencing or what they're seeing is normal, or is something that's just part of the process for wildlife, and a normal behavior or routine. And then we have worked really hard to have a community presence with events and different presentations that we're doing. And then all of our social media outlets, we really put an effort in education, because that is a big piece to what we're doing.
That's huge. That's really the most important factor, really, is the education part, because people don't know what they don't know. And wildlife is it's a tricky thing.
Yes.
You can't just pick up a snake. Come on.
Well, I know some people who do, but yeah,
I know.
it's
Not
a
me.
thing. No, it's a thing, because there's relocating or moving, and the animal's wild. And that's the other thing. I think
And
people,
scared.
how much of what you do through education is people not actually understanding how wild an animal is, that even a bird can peck your eye out, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think
Sorry.
the reality,
Sorry.
I mean, we have some birds that are very dangerous. Yes. So the reality is that as wonderful as the internet and social media is, there's a lot of self-proclaimed experts on things and on topics. And if you are a part of any of the groups and things, if you notice how quick, when someone puts out a question about a baby bunny, for example, it will very, very quickly become, there's lots of people who have opinions on how to take care of that baby bunny. And in reality, none of them are really licensed rehabilitators or people who have the experience. And one of the things that we talk to people a lot about is that raising wildlife, while maybe you have experience with domestic rabbits, it is very, very different in not just what they need nutritionally, but also in all the things that we have to ensure that they know how to do psychologically, and all the behaviors that they need. And these are all things that, as rehabilitators, as the facility that we are, it's years and years and years of education and training and professional development and a number of pieces. And so a lot of times we end up talking to people after they've kind of gone down the rabbit holes of social media or other places, of the internet in general. We get a lot of animals that come in that people have tried to raise themselves for a while. In the state of North Carolina, it is illegal to keep any native wildlife for more than 24 hours. And so without the appropriate licensing and permitting. And so a lot of times, people who try to keep them either figure that out and then call us, or they call us after the animal is not doing well. and we step in and help them and do everything that we can. And so it's kind of a double-edged sword in that the internet and social media is there and it can be beneficial, but it's also a lot of misinformation and things that if you're not really spending the time to do your research can get the animals in a position that isn't best for them.
So let's look at like guests coming into Asheville, because you do get a lot going to all the natural areas, and especially spring we talk about birds, and it's baby season, and a lot of times there's going to be, whether it's squirrels or birds, not everybody in the pack or the clan, whatever group of I mean, I had to just I don't know what, some car just killed an opossum where we are in Lubbock,
Yeah.
Texas. The first
And left
day
it.
I wake up in the morning here,
Yeah.
and we travel full time, and yeah, no,
It's
not only
mean.
did we have no internet, but maybe the opossum and the internet got together. I don't know, but this poor opossum, just I think, got hit by a car in the neighborhood, and it crawled up to where the tree is here and passed away. And so I had to take care of the opossum, and I was like, God, what are the rules here? Are you allowed to? Are people paranoid about rabies, and what do you do? And so, there was like this whole thing, and because I was, I'm not, um, Nancy and I are very familiar with wildlife and done a lot in conservation. And I'm going, oh my God, there's going to be different rules because we're in a different town. I don't know what these are. And that's why I keep thinking we travel full time and we're in parks across the country, and everything is different. The birds are different, the bugs are different, the snakes are different. Everything is always different. And we always have to constantly check ourselves like, wait, this is different than here. It's not what you just lived with a couple months ago, and it's always different. And every place has different rules and different behaviors according to what your landscape is, right? And your ecology is. So it's always this different thing. So I always think, as travelers, we've got to kind of almost, I would like to see more being done in the tourism sphere of understanding wildlife. When you think about places like Asheville, you've got the Blue Ridge Parkway, like I was saying, the forest, and Smoky Mountains National Park and everything. And even sometimes then you're in areas that your cell phone doesn't work. I think as travelers, I feel like we need to kind of arm ourselves with some extra information before we go on a hike. What do you think, Savannah? Like, what can we do as travelers to be better stewards to the wildlife, so that if we see something, we know a little bit more? I'm not saying we have to go to college or anything, but there's some basics that maybe we should be familiar with before we just start stepping out into the wilderness.
Yeah, definitely. Those are great points. And I think that there's a number of things that people can do if they are frequent travelers, or they frequent other states, or even if they're just frequenting areas that don't have a lot of good cell service or internet service. Even if it's in areas like around here where a lot of people are constantly out hiking and enjoying the different all the different things that this area has to offer. And a lot of that means that there's not cell service and internet service. And so some of it could just simply be spending some time to educate yourself on some of the natural behaviors of some of the most common species, because that's not really going to change from state to state or region to region. So for example, songbirds, we get a lot of bird calls in the summertime with that there's a bird on the ground that can't fly. And with songbirds, once they come out of the nest as babies, and they're in what's called the fledgling stage, they have to learn to fly. And they do that by coming out of the nest and coming to the ground, and then basically learning how to use their wings from the ground. And so a lot of times we'll get those phone calls that there's a bird on the ground that's hurt, it's not flying. And in reality, it's a baby that is learning how to fly. And so if we just leave that baby alone for a day or a few hours, they very quickly figure out how to get themselves up off the ground. And especially if there are other birds in the area, we have a lot of people who bring us birds and say, I was being dive bombed by these other birds while I was trying to pick this one up. And it's in the reality, that's the parents trying to tell you to get away from their baby. And so when they're on the ground, the parents are still caring for them. They're still taking, paying attention to them. And as long as they're in a somewhat safe space, there's not cats stalking them or dogs, or they're not on the side of a road, it's totally fine to leave them alone. And it could be something you come back and check later, see if they're still there. Other ones that are very common are deer. So fawns are ones that babies get left in a safe space by mom. They have the camouflage to blend into their environment. They have no scent, and they know to lay perfectly still. And so mom will put them in a safe spot. She'll go out and do her foraging and other things, and then she'll come back to the baby. But she will not come back if she feels like there's threats. And so if people are close by, if there's dogs, if there's children, any of these things that are considered a threat, she's not going to bring attention to her baby. And so a lot of times, those are things that people can, watch from a distance, come back and check later. If it's a fawn that is truly in need of help, it will likely be crying and looking for things. So it might be following you, or would be up moving around. Those are all indications that it's, looking for mom, or it's hungry. Rabbits are another one. That rabbits make their nests sometimes in the most horrible places, and it's just a depression in the ground. Mom is only there in the morning and the evening, right at dusk and dawn, and you're not going to see her usually. And so if people call us about nest of bunnies, they think that because mom is not at the nest, the babies are orphans. And so we do a number of things, such as using twigs or long pieces of grass, making X's or tic-tac-toe patterns over top of the nest, and then checking again after either dusk or dawn, whichever your rotation you're in. And if those pieces of twig or grass are messed up, then we know that mom has come back to feed them. And so a lot of things is, kind of learning some of those little tips and tricks of species that are common, no matter where you are, that if you come across a baby, that you're gonna, you would be able to recognize, oh, this animal might need help. Other key factors is if you come across an animal that is bleeding, is lethargic, is not running away from you, these would all be indications that they probably need help. And then also probably taking some time, especially if you're going to a different state, or places, if you're really someone who thinks, hey, I might run into things, or at least I want to know how to be prepared. Just making an effort to look at the state wildlife organization. So every state has a wildlife organization that mandates and regulates all the wildlife activity, and all that information would be on their website. They could, it might be a list of rehabilitators, it might be a list of resources, maybe what the laws and the regulations are, because every state is a little bit different. And so that would be a way to kind of arm yourself with information, or at least resources if you needed them. There's also a nationwide, they're an organization, but it's a resource. It's called Animal Help Now. And they have set up where no matter where you are, you can go into their app or their website and put in information of where you are, what you have that needs help. And then it connects you with a list of resources of rehabilitators or people that are within your area that you can get help from. So that's always a good one too.
That is cool.
A lot of times when you're out in the wilderness and you see an animal and you believe it needs help, 90% of the time you're wrong. And 90% of the time when you're animal, you make it worse. Usually the parents are somewhere lurking by and watching, and they're going to run when you approach.
Well, I remember once a baby
or they're
crow.
either run or attack, one or the other, depending on the kind of animal.
Can't you also, like, if you try to help a bird, like a crow will start to hang on to that person, and then the parents won't want the crow again or something? Isn't there something like that too? Like animals won't come back and help the baby if you've touched it. Is that a myth or?
Yeah, that's actually kind of an old wives' tale.
Okay.
Yeah,
Here we
so
go.
yeah,
Cool.
so
That's
it's a
good.
great
I was gonna
it's
ask
a
that.
great point. Yeah, so that's kind of the thing that at least I know in this region. I've heard my whole life because I'm generationally from this area, and I've heard my whole life, don't touch the baby bird, mom won't come back. But in reality, birds actually don't have a sense of smell. And so they actually have no way. There's a few of them that have smell, but most of them do not. And they can't actually recognize that you've handled it. With other things like mammals that do have a sense of smell and things, for the most part, just like in humans, that innate mother nature is so strong that unless that animal, that baby has been removed for an extended period of time and has been exposed to a number of scents and smells that would be more of like a predator concern or a threat to the mother, they're going to take those babies back. And so we try really hard, if we get babies that come through or phone calls about babies that we feel like we can re-nest, we will put every effort we can into taking them back to where they were found, doing all the things we can possibly do to re-nest them. Because again, the mothers are always going to do a better job than we are. And so that would be our ultimate goal is, if we can re-nest them or reunite them with mom, we do everything in our power to do that.
That's awesome. And also the other thing is, like when I was talking about this opossum here in Texas, at first I was like, this could be playing dead. We don't know if it's just stunned, if it's lying there to know if it's safe yet. And because there was like movement in like little plants around it. And I thought, okay, I don't know if it's moving it. Is it the wind? Yeah, it's the wind here in Lubbock. But so I waited it out to see if this animal is going to move at all. We just sat watching it because I thought, you don't know, and it's a wild animal. And it's incredibly sad. And opossums, I had a friend who just was a rehabilitator and a rescuer for baby opossums, and we used to go feed them and help and take care of them. And they're crazy, like I'm cool, like like crazy cool, like their little faces, and they're like, I'm sorry, I love them like bats and everything. And but I wanted to talk about that playing dead because snakes will play dead. And I wonder about people trying to pick up wildlife, not understanding and thinking, oh, this is dead, or I need to do something, where you could actually get hurt with an animal playing dead out of safety.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the reality is that all wildlife pose potential danger to humans. And so, we have to look at it in the concept that they have to do what they have to do to protect themselves, defend themselves, that kind of fight or flight moment. And a lot of them only have certain ways that they can defend themselves. And so for species that kind of do this playing dead concept, that is part of their defense mechanism, is that if they play dead, if they release musks and odors that make them smell dead, we have some, there's some snake species that even can kind of on cue bust capillaries in their mouth so that they actually look like they're bleeding. All of these things make a predator think that, okay, I don't want to eat this animal, or I don't want to deal with this. And so even for animals that, they're doing it intentionally, or maybe they're just in shock. So a lot of times we'll have animals that come in that, they've been hit by a car, but they really have only been stunned by that car. Those animals, once they kind of come to their senses a little bit, or they realize maybe that, if they're intentionally kind of playing dead, they realize that it's safe again, or that this is their moment to get away, they're going to come to very quickly. And so one of the things that we encourage people to do a lot is don't assume that just because they're not moving around a lot right now, that they're not going to all of a sudden. We still need to do all the things to protect you as a person, to ensure that you're safe. Even our baby animals still have means to protect themselves, whether that's scratching or biting. And so one of the things that we do is as part of our hotline and our education to people that we're helping, if we've determined that the animal really needs to be helped, is that we're walking them through what is the safest way for you to do this. Because we also worry not only about the scratching or the biting, that kind of thing of a wild animal, but also the fact that animals carry diseases, they carry pathogens and other things that they could be something that you might be susceptible to, or you have not been exposed to, or maybe your pets or your children. And so it's really important that we always make all the effort to protect the people who are trying to help, or if you're trying to help wildlife, you're protecting yourself in a number of ways for safety reasons, for disease reasons, all of those things.
Yeah, I remember like the baby opossums, we had to wear big long gloves and stuff. You weren't allowed to go and hand feed
All
opossums.
sorts of
Yeah, and like
diseases.
that's like this dead opossum. Like I think you. What would you say if I called you and said, I think I have a dead opossum, but I'm not sure? What would you do? What would you say? Like,
yeah. So, it would be a conversation to say, what are the things that you're seeing that you feel like that it might be dead or it may not be dead? Are you, is it in a place that you can safely approach it? We get a lot of calls about animals on the side of roads and highways, and people want to help, but we often have to be very mindful of that. Is it safe for you to approach this animal on the side of a highway or a road, et cetera? So it would be a conversation about your safety of the area that you're in. And then if we talk through these pieces and we determine that, yes, the animal is expired, then it would also potentially, with possums, because they have a pouch and their babies are in that pouch, they're still viable after mom is gone. And so a lot of times it's also a conversation of, are you comfortable checking to see if it's a male or a female? And if it is a female, are you comfortable looking to see if there's babies in her pouch, which is just basically a flap of skin on her belly? And if it is, then we would talk through what's the best way to help those babies if they're still alive. And so sometimes for us, that means we just encourage the person to bring us the possum, and we remove the babies from the pouch and all that, so that it's safe, that we are not asking somebody to do that on the side of a road. We make sure we get all the babies. There's a number of factors that way. And then for other situations, the people maybe have already acquired the babies out of the pouch and they're calling us. They can confirm, yes, this mother is gone. We got the babies, and then we go from there.
wow.
I was reading the other day, this lady was walking from her house to her garage. An owl attacked her hair. And it flew off because she kind of hit it, because it was, clutching at her hair, and it flew back and tried again. And I'm thinking, man, you need to change your hair color or something, or put a hat on or something. But I mean, it's kind of
It's
funny
tippy
in a
head,
way. Yeah, really.
I know.
Yeah, really. But I mean, it is, the closer we are with nature, we keep encroaching on what would normally be their territory, things are going to happen. So in a way, it's like, I don't know how to say this, but maybe mouse brown's not the right color. I don't know.
Well, but
You know,
doesn't that also just knowing that maybe there's a nest there, and that's something that we can all be aware of, just even in our gardens or your local
Exactly.
community parks, and that
Yeah.
with this coexistence, Savannah, isn't that like you're from the very beginning of our conversation today, it is about the human animal interaction, but we also have to coexist. So it's understanding that maybe a mom is there protecting her baby, or the dad.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of it is understanding that, especially in an area like ours, where we're seeing more and more development in wild places. We're seeing more and more wildlife is right in people's backyard or on their porches, et cetera, because of where their homes are. That figuring out how to coexist. And so in situations where identifying and knowing that this bird is flying at me every time I walk out my door, identifying that there's probably a nest there and they're being territorial to protect that nest. And, if we're talking to somebody, some of the solutions are, can you use another door? Do you have to go through that door? Can you, in the short window of time that they're going to be in that nest, can you utilize a different space? We do that a lot with rabbits, and that, people will call us and there's a rabbit nest in a dog lot or in a backyard or around a children's playground set. And with rabbits, the babies from the time that they're born until they're ready to leave the nest is usually about 3 weeks at most. And
that's it. Wow.
Yeah. And so typically when by the time people find bunnies, usually they're already a week or more into this process. And so we can talk people through ways to, can you not use the playground for a couple of more days, or can you leave your dog inside? Can you walk your dog on a leash so that they're not just in the backyard for 10 days? And so we really try to talk through how can we not disturb the natural behavior that is happening with these animals, and to help keep you safe or your pet safe. And for every single situation, it's going to be potentially a little bit different. And so that's where it's so important that we have our hotline, and that happens is that full conversation in the beginning. And a lot of the calls that are coming into our hotline, we're able to work with these folks who are calling in with questions of, this is happening or that's happening, I'm experiencing this, and we can work with them to figure out how best to coexist, either in the moment or for a more long period of time.
Wow. I want to get into how we can all help you and talk about volunteers and going through your wish list. And I was just like, wow, look at this. You obviously, you guys are doing so much, and you're doing it residentially and, from the tourism side, the wild areas, right? But I wanted to just touch on this, like Steve and Karen have a certified wildlife habitat, a backyard wildlife habitat that anyone can do in their house, at their house, in their garden, even if they have a porch patio. If it's at your business, like Steve and Karen's, a bed and breakfast, and a lot of bed and breakfasts do it, and I wish a lot more did. And it's really about not having a dead space in a neighborhood, right? And creating a habitat that has the food, the shelter, the water, not putting chemicals down. And I mean, we've seen all kinds of birds. I mean, even, and I hate to say this, Steve and Karen, but Ozzy and I found a little snake the one day, but it was like a little rat snake. It wasn't anything that guests should be scared of. And that is my point.
I got a brown snake the other day.
Yeah, see, I think it was a brown snake. Was it out there by the actual habitat sign? It's
it was on the lawn, and I picked him up and he peed on me.
Oh, well, see, he said, no, don't eat me. Like, I'm going to be stinky on you. I'm going to give you the stinkies. But this is the thing, is that having these habitats, and I wonder, like, how far reaching this can go, like, especially with Steve and Karen having it at their business. It kind of gives people an introduction to the wildlife, because I know you've also had a bear go through your backyard, and to have and you have the squirrels, we know that, to have this introduction. I mean, they're in a historic downtown district, and yet here's this wildlife, right, living right there, and for guests to come and be able to sit outside in the garden, take in this wildlife or observe it while they're having breakfast and seeing the squirrels, the birds, and then people doing it hopefully at their own homes, that they start to watch the wildlife with their kids and start to understand the wildlife and see how wildlife lives. Do you think that is a step that we can take? Because at the same time, that could also lead to interaction that we don't want, right? So there's this balance, but I think we need these spaces, right? And if we do it out of let's learn and observe, wouldn't that be the way to do it, to help?
Yeah, I think that, one of the foundations that we try to work off of is that we have to cultivate and nurture this desire for people to protect wildlife and wild places. And while we, as rehabilitators, we're directly working with those injured and orphaned animals that people are coming in contact with, there's a much bigger piece to that of not only do we how do we prevent those human caused reasons that wildlife is coming in, but even to the point of that coexisting and the desire to still have these wild places, and how to work with these kind of nuisance wildlife situations and a number of those factors, and things like certified wildlife habitats in backyards is a great way for people to get involved. There's also so many ways that homeowners and families can do things that don't even go to the full extent of being a certified habitat, but just doing things that provide water and food and shelter for wildlife, encouraging that it's okay for them to be in your space and to share that space, doing things that don't create nuisance wildlife, but that are also not pushing the wildlife out, because the more that we push them out and away, the more nuisance that we actually have. And so it's a lot of that kind of learning how to coexist. And, for a lot of it is we're connecting with adults and people in that generation, but we also work with a lot of kids, and a lot of it is getting kids excited about it. They tend to go home and get their parents excited about it, or grandparents or aunts and uncles and all those people. And, they're that next generation. They're the ones that are going to be the ones that really help us ensure that it's continuing once, we're not doing it anymore. And so, a lot of it goes back to the education, the getting people excited about coexisting, and what they can do to nurture, even if it's just having bird feeders and having bird baths and other water that's out there. There's just so many ways that people can do this, whether they're in an apartment setting, or they own a home with property, or it's a business that has abilities to do these things.
My parents used to go out into the desert and take tortoises out of the wild and bring them home as pets. And it's not, and seriously, as a kid growing up, I love all wildlife and animals because I was around them a lot. But it wasn't until I got older that I looked back and went, dude, what were you doing? You actually took animals out of the wild and brought them, even though a tortoise it's not like trying to catch a leopard or something, but seriously, they used to do that. There was that generation that, I could just go out here and get this, and I think we're mostly past that now, I hope. But there are still times when wildlife meets people, and we aren't really taught so much how to react or what to do.
Especially if you're from a city. If you're from a city, you don't hear that much.
Yeah, and I remember going to Yellowstone Park and trying to feed a deer, and the ranger stopped and said, "What the heck are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm feeding the deer." And he's like, "No, you're not. You do it again." And he said he would give me a ticket. And so I was like, "But they're so cute," because that's how I was raised, and I was pregnant with Lisa at the time, and he looked at me and goes, "You have any idea how dangerous this is?" And he really taught me a lesson. He really, really did. And he almost gave me a ticket for $75. I had to talk my way out. Because I was
see my baby.
I know, he's so cute. Look at those big eyes. But the deer did rise up on its back feet and paw at me. And then I'm like, uh-oh. Because
now you know why I have such a sick sense of humor.
Yeah, no.
Something hit me in the head.
No, and it was like I really learned a lesson that day. Yeah, and it was like I didn't know a deer could be aggressive.
Yeah, deer can.
It's a Bambi,
I've had to herd deer out of gardens and things for people, and you can get kicked, and they look you. I mean, you've got to. It is this education thing is so huge. And Savannah, I wonder, especially if you're in a city, that a lot of times the city, they're talking about, gators are coming in closer in places like South Carolina and Florida, and people are getting hurt, their animals are getting hurt because there's this like almost unawareness, like I'm in a city, I'm safe. and that's not true. And this
Yes, wait.
coexistence, that's why I say, like, cities, they're having hawks and owls nest in places that you never
Yeah.
would think. The animals are adapting more than the humans are adapting, yet, we're all supposed to be in this wild world together. So I think what you're doing is so huge and
Michael,
important on the education, and then the rehab side.
Mhm.
um, how important is volunteers, and how hard is that, because you're dealing with wildlife, so there's got to be a ton of training. I was looking on your wish list and I see a lot of books on there. um, are you working with interns, like, so how does that work for you to do that much education on the phone lines and the rehab work itself?
So our facility, we started out as all volunteer, and it's been wonderful in that we've grown to the point, fortunately and unfortunately, because the growth is there because the need is there. And so we've been able to grow to the point that we've added staff now, which has been very beneficial to be able to do all that we do. But we still really run because of our volunteers. And we have a really large core of volunteers. We have well over 100 volunteers that help us in a variety of ways.
Wow,
And
that's a lot.
and the things like our hotline is fully manned by volunteers. And so volunteers make that possible. We have a number of volunteers that work directly in our facility, working with wildlife, doing rehabilitative care with us. And we have a number of people who are doing other things. So we run, we serve all of Western North Carolina. That's depending on who you talk to and what you look at. It's up to 22 counties. And we also even work with some animals that come out of counties outside of Western North Carolina, down into the Piedmont and beyond. And so we work with a large team of volunteers who help us with transport. And so those people are driving hundreds of miles every week to get animals to and from finders to us, or from us to other facilities. And volunteers make it possible. They're the ones that are making it possible. We work with just under 2,000, or right around 2,000 animals a year right now. And our hotline fields right at roughly 5,000 calls last year. And so it's a big undertaking for sure. We do offer internships. We offer internships year round for students who have an interest in the field, or are working to get into the field, or anything that's relative to what we do. We're really unique. We're the only facility of our kind in Western North Carolina. And we're the only facility in Western North Carolina that holds a number of the licensing and permitting for different species. And so we offer a unique experience for interns and students who want to or need to get the experience of hands-on, a variety of species, the medical aspect. There's a number of things that we can offer with what we do that they can't get anywhere else in this region. And so that is a big piece. And because we are a nonprofit, we're fully funded off of donations, and we rely heavily on the general public, the corporate sponsors and people that we have, just like Steve and Karen, who get involved and support what we're doing, support our mission, support the wildlife. And things like the wish list is a great way for people to help out if they can't physically be there, or they don't want to do a monetary donation. There's always supplies and things that we need to do the work that we're doing. And so there's a lot of ways that people can get involved and help us work toward our mission, but also be helping and making a difference for wildlife.
It's like next time you do your Amazon, just add in another thing, right? Because you talk about what you need on there, and there's like Amazon. Are you part of the Amazon Smiles program? I don't know if that still goes. Does that still exist?
No, so they actually just canceled the Amazon Smile, which is really unfortunate for nonprofits.
Yeah.
And so I think there's some other options out there that we're looking into as ways that people can, do their shopping and also be doing a contribution. Yeah.
That sucks. That really sucks. It's really, there's, I mean, that's why I really appreciate Steve and Karen bringing you on the show today, because we do have to look at the places we travel to. We have to look at the places we live in, and have those connections with, not just always through these big, giant things. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like Amazon.
Right.
They did a good job with that. And obviously there's a lot of things people can purchase through there and have sent to you, which is awesome. Um, but I think that there's always that extra connection. And I think travelers going through an area can appreciate that and be part of the place that they're in. You know, we're looking at this as, and when, Earth Day's coming up, etc. But really, even those holidays are great. But this is something about when you go somewhere, um, what are you leaving and what are you learning about? There's all these terms,
Mm-hmm.
transformational travel and regenerative travel, volunteering, all of these things. But the
Even
reality is
alone
actually just
travel.
get involved and not make the mistakes like Nancy's family, which is my
Hmm.
family, taking
Yeah.
the tortoises
Yep.
out. And this is
That's
something that
crazy.
a lot of people used to think they were helping.
Yeah.
And you were talking about traditions in especially your setting in Appalachia, and it happens in the deserts of Joshua Tree and in all kinds of areas around the world of tradition. And in wildlife conservation, it's like, okay, we're going to tell you your family was wrong with what they're doing for
Mhm.
generations, but
Mm-hmm.
how do we move forward? It's like this was a tradition, but it doesn't mean the tradition works today. You can always
Right.
look back at a tradition, but how do we move forward in education without killing the person who's done the wrong thing because of you know what I mean? How do we get people to move forward without
Making
there's
them
like
feel
pride
bad.
that comes with that, and there's angst, it's a moving forward and it's a big change. It's a cultural change without
Mm-hmm.
imposing guilt.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think guilt is always wrapped around this and looking down on people when if they've been raised a certain way and lived in an area, especially unincorporated areas. I mean,
Mhm.
you know, I mean, just if you've been living in the backwoods your whole life, right? You've been in the backwoods. And it doesn't mean you're
Mm-hmm.
stupid. It just means, hey, this is how my family has survived for years. How are we going to change that? So, can we move forward for people to not have that guilt and for other people to not look down on them? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Mm-hmm.
Nancy said it really well earlier, and that you only know what you know. And for especially these areas that have generation or cultural information and stories and behaviors, um, that those are pieces where it's just been passed down, and it's just they know what they know, and it doesn't mean that it's necessarily wrong of them. They're working off the knowledge they have, and so I think that's where it comes into connecting with the next generation. It comes into connecting with the kids that are going to come in and fill those shoes and fill those spaces. And
Mm-hmm.
if we can nurture the importance of wildlife and wild places, and try to do all that we can to share the correct information, to change those fears and those myths on all the species that they're around, we can start seeing a difference. And we see it every day when we work with kids, and even with families. We have a number of them where a family will show up with an animal that they have helped, and the kids are really the ones that have been the driving force to get this animal to us and to help it. And we put the effort into interacting and engaging and really working with those kids and those families, because we see it in those kids that they are seeing that they're making that connection, and they're going to take it back with them, and they're going to, whether they really can make a difference at that moment, but they're going to carry it with them forever. And so,
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
those are the pieces that I think that's how we move forward. And it's not just in what we're doing as rehabilitators in this region, but just kind of on a national scale or on a global scale. It's really going to be that next generation and those people
Mm.
that are putting in the effort to really nurture that with our next generation, our kids.
I love it.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
my biology teacher, Mr. Collins, who I had such a crush on, he's so cute. Um, he was the one who said, "Do you have any idea what your family has just done?" And he showed me the difference between what the tortoise would eat in the wild, vitamin and mineral wise, as compared to iceberg lettuce, which is what my parents were feeding the tortoises. And it's showing me how eventually these animals are not going to live as long and be as well as the animals in the wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and he really did teach me. It made a big impression because so I had to go home to my parents and tell them, hey, we need to put them back. But then there was the question, once you've taken an animal out of the wild, can you put them back? Like there's this thing about now there's a human smell on the tortoise and the others will kill it and all these kind of crazy things that I learned as a kid growing up that are probably mostly not true.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, there's the factor of, like we talked about with the babies and, how long they've been gone. But when you get into bigger conversations, like removing tortoises, there's now a lot of those species that because that was done so prevalently in the West, when people would go on vacation and they'd pick up a tortoise and bring it back home with them, those species are now really threatened and they're struggling. And so now, the next generation is now the ones who are trying to fix and repair that. And so, you see a lot of that. And we do that. We see that a lot too, is where, people will take things out of the wild. We have these conversations of, you've had it now for 2 years, 3 years. This animal now potentially has lost a lot of the natural instincts to do what they need to do. Maybe they're now dealing with a number of medical issues because they've been malnourished or they didn't have the appropriate, for tortoises, especially, and reptiles, a lot of the appropriate lighting and minerals and vitamins and a number of things. And so now if we take that animal and put it back in the wild, is it really going to thrive and do well? And then what are we exposing the rest of the population to? Because that animal has been now exposed to pathogens and different things that are in captivity. And
it's like people swimming with dolphins with their
Yeah.
sunscreen on and stuff. And then the sunscreen affects the dolphins and the fish. And it's like, we humans we're the dirty ones, and we don't think that, when we lived out in Joshua Tree area, I remember we had vacant lots on either side and we had like the wildlife garden, trust me, and every feral cat in the neighborhood lived
And
there
coyotes.
alongside coyotes and roadrunners. They all somehow coexisted in our backyard. But I remember once these two guys came out and they tried to chase and catch, because we had all these lizards, the collared lizards, and we had chuckwallas and everything. Everybody knew we were the haven because of the water and everything. And these guys came out
plants.
trying to chase them in the vacant lots, and I had to call the cops on them, and I chased them because I will come after you if you go after a piece of wildlife. I will get you. And these guys were trying to chase them so they could put them in a pet store.
That. They jumped over the fence and we're
I
like,
know.
oh
And
yeah,
we're like,
watch
oh
this.
yeah, watch this. I got spears
We're
from Africa.
dangerous.
I'll kill
We're
you.
dangerous. Yeah.
But I mean, I'm not going to kill someone, but like, you know what I mean? They were so.
You cut your feet off.
And yes, and
That's
eat
it.
your
Eat your feet and you'll
Eat
never
your
walk
feet.
to heaven.
That's right. But that was this culture there at the time, and it was like we were in shock. Like, you're stealing lizards and chuckwallas out of they were trying to get roadrunners as pets for the pet industry. And California now has stopped the pet shops, which is good, but I know that there's still tons of backyard stuff happening. But that's part of it. I wonder about wildlife, how some of the injuries come is from people trying to get them for pets. I don't know if you see that in your area of people trying to take them as pets.
We see a lot more of is that when people find orphans, a lot of times they will try to raise them on their own and keep them that way. We are, though, we're in a region that in Appalachians in general, it has a lot of diversity with the reptile amphibian populations. And, it's not uncommon. Every so many years, you'll see articles come through where there's been a big seizure of somebody who was trying to take a number of turtle species out of the country into China for the Asian turtle market. And one of the last ones that happened, the bulk of those turtles actually came out of the Southern Appalachians. And so, it is happening, and it is a reality of that, that kind of thing. The black market, the animal trade, the exotic pet trade is still very, very, it's a big industry. And so there's a lot of that still happens kind of all around us, and we see it even in our region. We see it in a variety of ways.
Oh man.
Well, even like the movie star industry with permits to have tigers and lions on their property. Come on.
I know
it's giving permits for that.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I think now we're getting better in the movies where they don't need to use animals too, when they're we've got so much more. And so it's like, I look at it as like, Savannah, where you're going, like the new generation really working towards coexistence and doing the right thing and changing. And at the same time, we have tools now that we didn't have before. And we have rehab centers that are a phone call away, like yours, that we really, really appreciate. And we appreciate everything you do. Everyone, again, you can go to AppalachianWild.org. And of course, they've got the wish list there. You can become a donor, a volunteer, contact them, do what you can to help. But I think also get to understand the wildlife when you go to Asheville and those surrounding areas to understand. And there's so much information on their website too. Look at those flow charts. If you see a bird out of its nest or, a baby bird, that kind of thing, they teach you about reptiles, mammals. Their website's awesome, and follow them on social media like Facebook as well. So thank you so much, Savannah. And before you go, Steve, Karen, I'm sorry, I've been a real pig asking Savannah all these questions, and it's, a show with you guys. Do you have any questions?
Hearing about it.
I'm a pig. I'm sorry.
There's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, you guys bring awesome guests on, and definitely Appalachian Wildlife Refuge is definitely a highlight to have on our show. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Savannah.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Savannah.
Yes, and everyone, again, lion-rose.com is a website to go to. It is the Lion and the Rose Bed and Breakfast in the Montfort Historic District in Asheville. And Steve and Karen will tell you, like, if you want to go on a hike or see a waterfall or butterflies, or they know the area, they hike all the time, that they can get out there. They really do love nature and wildlife, and will guide you the right places. So if you're into the wildlife, they're definitely a place to stay. Besides, Steve makes good beer and a good breakfast.
Yep.
Yes, and they've got Ozzy and Oreo, little dogs at the B&B that love to hike as well. So keep up with them there. And we're here every first Tuesday here on BigBlendRadio.com talking about Asheville. Thank you all for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.